you actually advising clients to think about behavioral science principles in their system design, right? So what sort of advice do you give to clients to say, this is the way we know people work, this is how you should think about the real prevention aspect of things?
Yeah, I think the reality is that we need formal systems, but formal systems only go so far. So we really need to understand the informal systems that are in play in an organization and understand their impact. So where in our organization, the rules are to be ethical, but the incentive is to achieve results. And as long as you achieve the results, no one really looks too much at the process of which the results were achieved. We ask people to follow the rules and give them clear incentives not to, or sometimes even make it impossible. We did an investigation about 18 months ago, which was a large-scale outsourcing company. And what they were doing was they were signing contracts which required a certain number of calls to be answered in a day, and that number was going up and up. And the call center providers, call center staff simply didn't have the capacity to meet those targets. And yet their bonuses were determined on individual and group performance and how many calls they answered. So what did they do? Over time, they were manipulating the numbers, and what that was called was updating the numbers, because ethical misconduct always has a euphemism, because if we saw it for what it was at the time, we wouldn't do it. So I come back to this informal systems and the danger in the blind spots when we fail to see our own ethical gaps and the ethical gaps of those around us. Those people in the call center operators, after they've been doing this for a number of years, they didn't think they were doing anything wrong. It was part of the routine. The numbers got updated according to the contract metrics every month. And the reality is that there are a lot of steps in the slippery slope to serious misconduct. Each of those steps changes us a little and legitimizes the next slightly worse step. So our ethical lines move without us realizing. And that first step, it often starts with a conflict of interest, which is built into the informal systems. So I think as a practical consideration, the question is, where is it in our organization that we do ask people to follow the rules and give them an incentive not to? What do we really reward? Whose behavior, be it individuals or departments, do we never question? Because these are the areas that we should look into first, because the risk is we have blind spots in these areas. And whilst the formal systems look like they're covering everything and every eventuality, the informal systems are failing to look at these areas. So I would always say, if you're looking at a compliance program beyond the formal systems, it has to be really tailored to the circumstances of that organization and looking at the areas which may be blind spots for that organization and in that context.
Matt, I see both Matt and Katie, you guys are both nodding your heads. Matt, I'm going to start with you. Any thoughts on that, the formal informal system distinction that Maryam set up?
Oh my goodness, yes. There was so much in there, Maryam. We could unpack that for the rest of the hour. I think, our formal systems at AT&T are excellent. We're an operating company, and we're very good at understanding what you need to know to be able to function properly in your role. The trick is the informal systems. And I'd like to talk for a minute about what happens when you are at a company, when you have so many distinct operating units, right? So there are people at my company that run the gamut, from folks that are outside, working on our network infrastructure, to people sitting in Washington, D.C., inside the belt, talking about policy and law, and everything in between. Right. So I believe, like Maryam stated, that in order for the informal system to work, you need to meet people where they are. So, how you do that in a company our size can be challenging. And that's what we're focused on right now. Because, for example, tone messaging, we all know what that is. Right? But for those of us, participating in the conference, tone messaging typically focuses on tone at the top, right? Is the senior leadership band speaking about ethics and integrity regularly, prolifically? Are they making that point heard? Very important. I think it is necessary, but not sufficient, right? Spoken like a true cognitive scientist, right? I think as you start to propagate that information throughout the organization, you have to really pay close attention to the business units that you are trying to reach. So you would not approach a sales organization. And in Maryam's example, Katie talked about it too. You know, these are folks who have immense goals. Their KPIs are strict and rigid, and they fight every day to meet and exceed those. And typically at many companies, those are attached to some sort of compensation benefit, right? We are the same. So you would speak to that organization very differently than you would, say, an ops team or a marketing group or a technology team, right? Which has a very different set of, we'll call it, Maryam, I'm not going to directly quote you here because I can't pull it out of my head, but it was something about that slippery slope, right? You don't just wake up one morning and decide to do something unethical. It builds and builds and builds, right? And that builds differently in different organizations. So to me, that's the power of the informal system. The formal system is rigid and structured. It protects us. It protects our customers. The informal system makes that real.
Katie, anything to add there?
Well, I want to go back to what Maryam said too about sort of the how, because I think it's so important to focus not just on whether someone achieves their goals, but did they do it the right way? And that's one of the things we've been really successful at influencing at our company is we have a whole new performance management program that employees they get rated on whether or not they achieve their goals. They get equally rated on a completely separate rating on how did they do it? Did they do it the right way? And because so often it's the lapse is we have this great performer, and I think you said it, Maryam, like nobody bothers to look under the rug there or that unit that's always producing to see are they doing it the right way. And so if you can make a point to equally focus on not just what did they do, but did they do it the right way? I always, when I talk to groups, I say, you know, are you promoting someone who got great results but left a lot of roadkill in their wake? Then that tells me what you really value. And I think it's where the actions and the words need to match. And I think what you said, Matt, about tone at the top, tone is not just the words, it's the behaviors, that whether or not those behaviors align to it. So one of the things we focus on a lot is, do the words and the actions match, or the inactions, because it's the things that we tolerate so often that get us in trouble and that don't match what we're saying. And it sends the message then to employees that this is what we really care about. You can get away with this.
So Katie, I'm going to preempt what I know is going to be a chat question coming in, because every time we ever talk about performance evaluations and having the how you did it component in there, the immediate follow-up question is always, how do I not make that totally subjective, right? If I'm a manager and I've hired my team or I've inherited my team, I think they're all good people, right? So the process of crafting the how questions on a performance evaluation is so challenging, because you can't just say, is this a good person? Did they live our values, right? Because the manager is going to say, of course they did. All my people are great people, right? How do you actually get managers to do that in a way that matters?
What we did was we identified 6 what we call leadership core behaviors. And then what we did is we took those 6 behaviors and we mapped out, what does that look like if you're an individual contributor? Because an individual contributor is also a leader. What does it look like if you are a manager of people or a manager of managers? And try to get really specific. I mean, so for ethics and integrity, one of the questions was, you know, at an individual contributor level, did you speak up? If you're a manager, did you foster a speak up environment? And if you're a leader, it's did you cultivate and encourage and reward a speak up environment? So we try to be pretty specific, but we mapped it out into a sort of 6 behavior matrix and then tried to make it role specific.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, I think that's one of the critical pieces, you know, that I have seen when I've seen it done well with the companies that we work with, is it's you can't, there's no one size fits all, you know, you did it the right way description for every role in your organization, particularly not, you know, if you're an organization the size of any one of the 3 companies, the 3 organizations you guys work with. You know, you have to think about, what does this look like in this particular job function? What does this look like in this particular role level? What does this look like doing it the right way for sales is going to be very different than doing it the right way, for somebody who's running a team of guys who are out reconnecting wires to poles, right? Those are very different skill sets.